The morning sun of Kepler 438b cast strange, purple light through the crystal windows of the Galactic Institute of Advanced Studies. Professor Zeth Kalar moved his forearms as he prepared his lecture materials. His blue skin glowed slightly under the artificial lights, and his tentacle-like fingers sorted through data tablets with practiced ease. Today was special. Today he would teach his favorite subject to a classroom full of young alien minds. The topic that always made him feel superior and wise. Humans. The lecture hall filled slowly with students from across the galaxy. There were tall, thin Zephyrians with their silver skin and large black eyes. Short, round Blobians rolled into their seats, their purple bodies bouncing slightly. A few crystalline beings sat in the back, their transparent forms catching the light like living diamonds. And scattered throughout were dozens of other species, each one more advanced than the primitive humans of Earth. In the third row, near the back, sat a figure in a dark hooded robe. The student kept his head down and never spoke to others. His name on the class roster read Jack Murphy, listed as a vegan exchange student from the Outer Rim. Nobody paid him much attention. He was just another quiet student trying to learn. But under that hood, Jake Morrison listened to every word with growing anger. Professor Zeth Kalar activated the holographic display at the front of the room. A three-dimensional image of a human appeared, rotating slowly so the class could see it from all angles. The professor's voice filled the room with confidence and authority. Students, welcome to Xenobiology 401. Today, we begin our study of one of the galaxy's most puzzling species. The humans of planet Earth have somehow convinced the Galactic Council that they deserve to join our civilized community. This decision, I believe, was a mistake. Several students made sounds of agreement. The Zephyrians clicked their long fingers together, which was their way of clapping. The Blobians bounced in their seats with excitement. Jake pulled his hood lower over his face and clenched his fists. The professor pointed at the human image with one of his tentacles. Look at this pathetic creature. See how it has only one heart. One. Most intelligent species have at least three. How can a being survive with such poor circulation? And look at these tiny lungs. Humans can only hold their breath for a few minutes. At most, my people can survive without air for 3 hours. The class murmured with amazement at their professor's superiority. But the worst part, Seth Kalar continued, is their incredibly short lifespan. Humans live for maybe 80 or 90 years if they are lucky. I myself am over 400 years old, and I am considered young by my people's standards. How can such short-lived creatures possibly gain enough wisdom to govern themselves, let alone join galactic society? A crystalline student raised a glowing appendage. Professor, what about their intelligence? Surely they must be smart if they developed space travel? Professor Zeth Kalar's tentacles writhed with what his species showed as laughter. Ah, excellent question, student Prismara. Human intelligence is perhaps their greatest weakness. They are ruled entirely by emotions. When faced with difficult decisions, they do not think logically like we do. Instead, they become angry or sad or afraid, and these feelings control their actions. Jake's breathing grew heavy under his hood. His enhanced hearing picked up every mocking word, every dismissive gesture. Let me give you examples, the professor said, calling up new images. In their recent diplomatic meeting with the Centaurian Empire, the human ambassador actually raised his voice and pounded his fist on the table. Can you imagine? Such primitive behavior from a species that claims to be civilized. The alien students gasped and made sounds of disgust. And their military tactics, Zeth Kalar continued with growing enthusiasm, are laughably simple. They rush forward with loud noises and crude weapons, hoping to overwhelm their enemies through sheer brutality. Any properly trained military force could defeat them easily. Jake remembered the Battle of Wolf, 359, where human forces had held off a Dominion fleet 3 times their size for 6 days. He remembered the clever tactics that had saved thousands of lives. But he said nothing. Their society is equally backward, the professor went on. They organize themselves into competing groups called nations and waste enormous resources fighting each other instead of working together. Even now, after joining the galactic community, they cannot agree on simple matters of governance. A Blobian student bounced higher. Professor, why did the Galactic Council accept them if they are so primitive? Zeth Kalar's skin darkened slightly, showing his displeasure. Politics, student Jalaman. Pure politics. The humans arrived at a time when the Council needed new members to vote on the Outer Rim treaties. Some soft-hearted species felt sorry for these newcomers and pushed for their acceptance. It was a mercy vote, nothing more. But surely, said another student, they must have some redeeming qualities? The professor paused, seeming to think seriously about the question. Then he shook his head. Their only notable trait is their stubborn refusal to acknowledge their own limitations. They believe themselves equal to species that have been traveling the stars for thousands of years. This arrogance would be amusing if it were not so dangerous. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he took notes. Every word felt like a personal attack, not just on him, but on everyone he had ever known and loved. Next week, Professor Zeth Kalar announced, we will examine specific case studies of human failures in galactic society. We will see how their emotional instability and primitive thinking have caused problems for everyone. Class dismissed. As the students filed out, chattering excitedly about the lecture, Jake remained in his seat. He stared at his notes, filled with lies and half-truths about his own species. Around him, alien voices discussed humans like they were amusing pets or dangerous animals. Jake Morrison had come to this prestigious university to learn about other species and cultures. He had spent months preparing his disguise, learning to walk and talk like a vegan. He had earned his place here through pure academic merit. But now, sitting alone in the empty lecture hall, he realized his education was going to be very different from what he had expected. He was not just going to learn about aliens, he was going to teach them about humans. 3 weeks had passed since that first terrible lecture. Jake Morrison sat in his usual seat, hood pulled low, watching Professor Zeth Kalar prepare for another session of human bashing. Each class had grown worse than the last. The professor seemed to enjoy finding new ways to insult and mock Jake's species. Today's holographic display showed images of human cities, but not the beautiful parts. Instead, the professor had chosen pictures of slums, pollution, and conflict zones. Jake recognized some of the locations. One was from a disaster area where humans had actually worked together to save thousands of lives. But the professor only showed the destruction. As you can see, Zeth Kalar began with his usual arrogant tone. Human civilization is built on chaos and violence. Look at these primitive structures they call cities. Notice how they pollute their own environment and crowd together like animals. A Zephyrian student raised her silver hand. Professor, why do they live in such terrible conditions? Because they lack the intelligence to plan properly, the professor replied. Humans cannot think beyond their immediate needs. They build without considering the future. They consume resources without thought for tomorrow. This is what happens when a species is ruled by emotion instead of logic. Jake's pen broke in his grip. He quickly grabbed another one, hoping no one noticed. The professor switched to new images. These showed human soldiers in various uniforms from different time periods. Their military history is particularly disturbing. Humans have been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. They seem unable to exist without conflict. But Professor, asked a young Globian, don't all species have wars? Zethkalar's tentacles waved dismissively. Civilized species fight when necessary, for logical reasons like resources or territory. Humans fight for abstract concepts like honor, freedom, or revenge. They will die for ideas that have no practical value. This proves their mental instability. Jake remembered his grandfather, who had died fighting to protect a colony of refugees from 3 different species. His grandfather had called it the right thing to do. The professor would probably call it emotional stupidity. Let me show you their most recent military embarrassment, the professor continued. New images appeared showing space battles. The siege of Titan Station. Human forces were completely surrounded by Dominion ships. Any rational species would have surrendered immediately to save lives. Jake straightened in his seat. He knew this story well. Very well. Instead, Zethkalar went on, the humans chose to fight. They used desperate, reckless tactics. They sacrificed their own ships to protect civilians. In the end, they lost over 60% of their fleet. A complete disaster caused by their inability to think clearly under pressure. Several students made sounds of pity and disgust. Jake's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. What the humans call heroism, the professor said with a sneer, civilized species recognize as waste and stupidity. Those ships and lives could have been saved with proper surrender protocols. Jake could not stay silent any longer. His hand shot up into the air. Professor Zethkalar looked surprised. The quiet student in the back row never participated in class. Discussions. Yes, Student Murphy? Jake stood up slowly, his voice steady despite his anger. Professor, I think your analysis of the Titan Station battle is incomplete. The entire class turned to stare at him. The professor's 4 eyes narrowed with interest and annoyance. Explain yourself, Student Murphy. Jake pulled out his datapad and activated his own holographic display. According to the official battle reports, the human fleet at Titan Station was protecting over 2 million civilians from 7 different species. The Dominion had refused to guarantee the safety of non-combatants. Your point? The professor asked coldly. My point is that the humans succeeded in their primary mission. All 2 million civilians were evacuated safely. Yes, they lost ships and lives, but they saved everyone they were trying to protect. How is that a failure? The professor's skin began to change color, showing his growing irritation. Because the cost was too high. A logical species would have negotiated a better solution. What if negotiation was not possible? Jake pressed. What if the only choices were to fight or to let innocent people die? There are always other options for intelligent beings. Zethkalar replied sharply. Jake felt his careful control slipping. Are there? What about the massacre at Kepler 442? The Zephyrian High Command had 3 days to negotiate with the Void Hunters. They tried logic, they tried diplomacy, they offered tribute. The Void Hunters killed 50,000 colonists anyway. Several Zephyrian students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was a painful topic for their species. That situation was different, the professor said quickly. How? Jake demanded. How was it different? The Zephyrians used logic and lost everything. The humans at Titan Station used emotion and saved everyone. Which approach was really better? The classroom fell silent. Students looked back and forth. Between Jake and the professor, like they were watching a tennis match. Professor Zethkalar's tentacles writhed with anger. Student Murphy, you seem to have an unusual interest in defending human tactics. Perhaps you admire their primitive methods. Jake realized he was walking on dangerous ground. His disguise was good, but not perfect. Too much passion might give him away. He forced himself to speak more calmly. I am simply pointing out that emotion and logic are not opposites, Professor. Sometimes caring about others leads to better outcomes than cold calculation. Ridiculous, the professor snapped. Emotion clouds judgment and leads to poor decisions. This is a fundamental principle of advanced psychology. Then why do humans keep winning? Jake asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a bomb. Students stared at Jake in shock. No one had ever challenged Professor Zeth Kalar so directly. Winning? The professor sputtered. Humans do not win. They stumble from one disaster to the next. Jake pulled up more data on his pad. In the last 50 years, human-led missions have a success rate of 87%. That is higher than any other species in the galaxy. Human diplomatic teams have resolved more conflicts than any other group. Human exploration crews have made more discoveries than anyone else. Those statistics are meaningless, the professor said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Are they? Jake asked. Or is it possible that your understanding of human psychology is wrong? The entire class was watching now. Some students were taking notes furiously. Others were checking their own data pads to verify Jake's claims. Professor. Zeth Kalar's skin had turned a deep purple, showing extreme agitation. Student Murphy, you will report to my office after class. We need to discuss your attitude problem. Jake nodded and sat down. Around him, students continued to whisper and stare. He had crossed a line today, and there was no going back. But for the first time in weeks, Jake Morrison felt good about himself. He had stood up for his species, even if they did not know it. He had planted seeds of doubt in alien minds that had never questioned their professor's teachings. The real education was just beginning. Jake knocked on the door of Professor Zeth Kalar's office with a steady hand. Inside, he could hear the soft sounds of the professor organizing papers and muttering to himself in his native language. The door slid open with a quiet hiss. Student Murphy, come in and sit down. The office was large and impressive, filled with awards and certificates from across the galaxy. Shelves lined the walls, packed with books and data crystals from dozens of different worlds. Behind the professor's desk hung a large painting of his home planet, with its 3 purple suns and crystal mountains. Jake sat in the chair across from the professor's desk. Zeth Kalar studied him carefully with all 4 eyes, his tentacles, moving slowly as he thought. That was quite a performance in class today, the professor said finally. You showed unusual knowledge about human military operations. Where did you acquire such information? Jake had prepared for this question. I study military history as a hobby, Professor. Battle tactics from different species fascinate me. Interesting. The professor leaned back in his chair. Tell me, Student Murphy, what do you think of my teaching methods? This was dangerous territory. Jake chose his words carefully. Your lectures are very detailed, Professor. You clearly know a great deal about many species. But you disagree with my conclusions about humans. I think the evidence might support different conclusions, Professor. Zeth Kalar's skin shifted to a lighter blue, showing he was thinking hard. Student Murphy, I have been teaching xenobiology for over 100 years. I have published 17 books on the subject. My work is respected throughout the galaxy. I am sure it is, Professor. And yet, a student who has been in my class for only 3 weeks thinks he knows better than I do. Jake met the professor's gaze steadily. I think the facts should speak for themselves, Professor, regardless of who presents them. The professor was quiet for a long moment. Then, to Jake's surprise, he began to laugh. It was not a mean laugh, but one of genuine amusement. You have courage, Student Murphy. Foolish courage, perhaps, but courage nonetheless. He leaned forward. Very well. I will give you a chance to prove your theories. Professor, I am assigning you an independent research project. You will have access to the Institute's complete database of military and diplomatic records. You will study human behavior in detail and prepare a comprehensive report on their capabilities. Jake felt his heart race with excitement and fear. What kind of report, Professor? You will analyze human performance in at least 50 different scenarios. Military battles, diplomatic negotiations, exploration missions, crisis responses. You will compare their methods and results with those of other species. The professor's eyes glittered with what looked like anticipation. And then you will present your findings to the entire xenobiology department. The entire department? Oh, yes. If you truly believe humans are as capable as you claim, then you should be willing to defend that position in front of the galaxy's leading experts. On alien psychology, Zeth Kalar's tentacles writhed with amusement. Unless, of course, you are having second thoughts? Jake straightened his shoulders. I accept the assignment, Professor. Excellent. You have 6 weeks to complete your research. I will arrange for you to have special access to classified records from the Galactic Defense Force and the diplomatic corps. The professor handed Jake a data crystal. This contains your authorization codes. Do not disappoint me, Student Murphy. Jake took the crystal and stood up. I will do my best, Professor. I am sure you will. That evening, Jake sat in his small dormitory room staring at the data crystal. Around him were scattered the textbooks and materials from his other classes, but he could not concentrate on any of them. His mind was racing with possibilities and dangers. He activated his personal computer and inserted the crystal. Immediately, his screen filled with access menus to databases he had never seen before. Military records going back centuries. Diplomatic. Files marked with the highest security classifications. Exploration reports from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. Jake began with the military files. He had told the professor he studied military history as a hobby, which was partly true. What he had not mentioned was that his father had been a general in the Terran Defense Force, and Jake had grown up hearing stories about battles and strategies from across human space. The first file he opened was about the open defense of New Geneva. According to the official report, human forces had been outnumbered 5-1 by Kree raiders. The Galactic Council's military advisors had predicted total defeat within hours. Instead, the humans had held the planet for 3 weeks, long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Jake dug deeper into the records. He found something interesting. The human commander had not followed standard military doctrine. Instead of concentrating his forces for a single large battle, he had split them into dozens of small groups. Each group used different tactics, forcing the Kree to constantly adapt their strategy. The Kree commander's own reports showed his growing frustration. The humans fight like ghosts, he had written. Every time we think we understand their plan, they change it. They seem to take pleasure in confusing us. Jake smiled as he read this. The human commander had used the Kree's own rigid thinking against them. It was brilliant. He opened another file. The rescue of Vega Station. A space station with 50,000 inhabitants from 12 different species had been caught in the gravity well of a collapsing star. The Galactic Rescue Service had declared the situation hopeless, but a human cargo ship had happened to be nearby. The captain, a woman named Susan Clark, had ignored orders to retreat. Instead, she had jury-rigged her ship's cargo bays to carry people and made 17 trips into the danger zone. She had saved 43,000 lives before her. Ship's engines finally gave out. The official report noted that Captain Clark's actions were reckless and illogical, but resulted in the largest civilian rescue in galactic history. Jake spent the next several hours reading file after file. Each one showed the same pattern. Humans facing impossible odds. Other species predicting failure. Humans finding creative solutions that no one else had thought of. But then Jake found something that made him stop cold. Hidden in a subsection of diplomatic records was a list of students enrolled in advanced education programs across the galaxy. Jake recognized several of the names. They were humans using fake identities, just like him. Lisa Chun was studying engineering on Proxima Station under the name Lila Centauri. Danny Rodriguez was learning galactic law on Alpha Centauri, calling himself Dan Rigel. Amy Jackson was researching xenobiology on Kepler 452b as Anna Kelper. Jake sat back in his chair, stunned. He was not alone. There were dozens of humans scattered across the galaxy's universities, all hiding their true identities to gain access to advanced knowledge. Suddenly, Jake understood something profound. This was not just about him proving Professor Zeth Kalar wrong. This was about humans quietly infiltrating the galaxy's educational systems, learning everything they could about other species while remaining undetected. It was the most ambitious intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history, and most of the targets had no idea it was happening. Jake smiled as he turned back to his research. He had 6 weeks to compile evidence about human capabilities, but now he realized his real mission was much bigger than that. He was going to show the galaxy what humans could really do. 6 weeks had passed faster than Jake could have imagined. His small dormitory room looked like a war zone, covered with data pads, printed reports, and holographic displays frozen in meta-analysis. Empty food containers sat stacked in corners, evidence of countless late nights spent researching. Jake had barely slept in the last week. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw charts and battle plans and diplomatic records. His presentation was ready, but he kept finding new evidence that made him want to add more sections. The scope of what he had discovered was staggering. Today was the day. In 2 hours, he would stand before the entire xenobiology department and present his findings. The thought made his stomach twist with nervousness and excitement. A soft chime from his door announced a visitor. Jake opened it to find a delivery drone carrying a formal invitation printed on expensive crystal paper. The presentation had been moved to the grand auditorium. Faculty members from other departments would be attending. Some were coming from off-world, specifically for this event. Jake realized that Professor Zeth Kalar had turned this into a major academic spectacle. The professor clearly expected Jake to fail publicly, providing entertainment for the galaxy's leading scholars. Jake dressed carefully in his formal student robes, making sure his bio makeup was perfect and his vocal modifier was working properly. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw Jack Murphy, a quiet vegan exchange student about to give the presentation of his life. But inside, he felt like Jake Morrison, a human who was about to change everything. The grand auditorium was packed. Jake had never seen so many different species in one place. Tall, elegant ethereals floated near the ceiling, their translucent bodies glowing softly. Massive rock people sat in specially reinforced seats, their granite faces showing curiosity. Dozens of other species filled every available space. At the front of the auditorium sat the xenobiology faculty, including Professor Zeth Kalar. The professor's skin showed a confident blue color, and his tentacles moved in what Jake now recognized as barely contained amusement. Dean Quile Ara, a distinguished feathered one, introduced Jake with formal politeness. Today, Student Jack, Murphy will present his research on human tactical and diplomatic capabilities. This presentation represents 6 weeks of intensive study using our most advanced database resources. Jake walked to the center of the stage. The auditorium fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes focused on him with expressions ranging from mild interest to open skepticism. Distinguished faculty and fellow students, Jake began, his modified voice carrying clearly through the hall. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share my research. 6 weeks ago, I was asked to study human behavior and capabilities. What I found surprised me. Jake activated his holographic display. The first image showed a star map of the galaxy with human territories marked in blue. Humans have been part of the galactic community for only 37 years. In that time, they have participated in over 200 joint operations with other species. Their success rate is 89%, the highest of any species currently active in galactic affairs. A murmur ran through the audience. Several faculty members pulled out datapads to check his figures. "Let me show you some specific examples," Jake continued. He brought up a detailed battle analysis. The liberation of Harmony Colony. Dominion forces had enslaved the population and built massive defensive positions. The Galactic Defense Force classified the mission as impossible. The display showed troop movements and tactical positions in 3 dimensions. Human forces arrived with only 12 ships against a fleet of 60. Standard military doctrine. Would have required a direct assault with massive casualties. Jake paused, looking directly at Professor Zethkalar. Instead, the humans did something unprecedented. They contacted the enslaved population directly and organized a coordinated uprising from within while simultaneously attacking from space. The display showed the battle unfolding in real time. The Dominion forces found themselves fighting on 2 fronts with no communication between their ground and space units. They surrendered in 18 hours with minimal casualties on all sides. Aye. Crystalline Professor raised a glowing appendage. Student Murphy, this appears to show effective planning. But surely this was just luck? Jake smiled and brought up another display. The mediation of the Centauri trade war. 7 species had been fighting over mining rights for 12 years. The Galactic Council's best diplomats had tried everything. Logic, threats, economic incentives. Nothing worked. A human diplomat named Robert Chun was brought in as a last resort. He spent 2 weeks not in the conference rooms, but in the markets and taverns and social centers of each species' territory. He learned about their cultures, their fears, their hopes. The new display showed complex economic and social charts. Chun discovered that the real conflict was not about mining rights at all. It was about fear. Each species was afraid the others would gain too much power and threaten their whole worlds. So what did he do? Jake asked the audience. Instead of negotiating a mining treaty, he proposed a joint defense pact. All 7 species would share the mining profits and use them to build a combined fleet to protect everyone's territory. The war ended in 3 days. More murmurs rippled through the auditorium. Jake could see some faculty members taking serious notes now. But perhaps most impressive, Jake said, is how humans handle impossible rescue situations. The display showed the Kepler Station disaster. Kepler Station was a research facility studying dangerous stellar phenomena. When their containment field failed, the station was caught in a gravity storm that was tearing it apart. Evacuation was impossible. The storm would destroy any ship that came near. Captain Maria Santos and her crew volunteered for a suicide mission. They knew they would probably die, but they could not leave 800 researchers to certain death. Jake's voice grew quieter, more intense. Santos figured out that if she could time her approach exactly right, she could use the gravity storm's own power to slingshot her ship in and out of the danger zone. It required split-second timing and perfect coordination. The battle display showed a tiny ship dancing through waves of destructive force. Santos made 7 trips into the storm. Each time, she saved as many people as her ship could carry. On the 7th trip, her engines failed. She was trapped in the gravity well with 50 researchers still aboard her ship. The audience was completely silent now. Santos ordered her crew to abandon ship in escape pods while she stayed behind to try to restart the engines. She managed to get them working for exactly 37 seconds, just long enough to get everyone else to safety. Jake paused, letting the silence stretch. Captain Santos died saving people she had never met from species she had never encountered before. That day, she did it because she believed it was the right thing to do. The auditorium was so quiet Jake could hear the air recycling systems humming. "This is what humans do," Jake said finally. "They find solutions where others see only problems. They make friends where others see only enemies. They sacrifice themselves for strangers because they cannot bear to do otherwise." Jake looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as he could. "For 6 weeks, I have studied over 300 cases of human involvement in galactic affairs. In every single case, humans exceeded expectations. Not because they are stronger or smarter than other species, but because they approach problems differently. They see possibilities where others see limitations. They build bridges where others build walls. They choose hope where others choose fear." Professor Zeth Kolar stood up slowly. His skin had changed to a deep purple, showing extreme agitation. "Student Murphy, your presentation is very impressive, but you seem to have forgotten something important." "What is that, Professor?" "You have been arguing that humans are capable and intelligent. But if that is true, then how do you explain the fact that they have been infiltrating our educational institutions using false identities?" The auditorium erupted in shocked gasps and alarmed chittering. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. The professor's 4 eyes glittered with triumph. "Did you think we would not notice? Background checks on several students have revealed inconsistencies. False documents, altered biometric records, sophisticated disguises." Jake's mind raced. His cover was blown. But something in the professor's tone made him realize that Zeth Kolar was fishing for information, not presenting facts. Jake made a decision that would change everything. "Professor," he said clearly, "you are absolutely right." The grand auditorium fell completely silent. Professor Zeth Kolar stared at Jake with all 4 eyes wide with shock. The hundreds of alien faculty members and students seemed frozen in their seats, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake reached up slowly and removed his vocal modifier. His natural human voice filled the hall for the first time in months. "You are absolutely right, Professor Zeth Kolar. Humans have been infiltrating your educational institutions, and I should know because I am one of them." Jake pulled off his bio-makeup patches, revealing his true human features underneath. His brown hair, his pale skin, his distinctly human facial structure. Gasps and alarmed sounds erupted from the audience. "My name is Jake Morrison. I am a human from Earth, from the North American continent. I have been in your xenobiology class for 4 months, learning about how you see my species." More shocked sounds filled the auditorium. Some faculty members stood up from their seats. Others activated their data pads, probably to alert security. Jake continued speaking before anyone could stop him. "Everything I told you in my presentation is true. Every fact, every statistic, every story. I know these things because I am human, and these are the achievements of my people." Professor Zeth Kolar's skin had turned almost black with shock and anger. "Security, arrest this infiltrator immediately." "Wait," Jake said, holding up his hand. "Before you do that, let me ask you something. For 4 months, I sat in your class. I took your tests. I participated in discussions. I earned the highest grades in xenobiology theory." Jake looked around the auditorium. Did my humanity make me stupid? Did my emotions prevent me from learning? Did my short lifespan stop me from understanding complex concepts? The professor opened his mouth to speak, but Jake continued. "You praised my analytical skills. You called my insights remarkable. You said I had one of the finest academic minds you had encountered in years of teaching." Jake smiled. "Were you wrong about all of that, Professor?" Before Zethkalar could answer, something unexpected happened. A student in the front row stood up and removed her own disguise. Her real face was clearly human, with dark hair and Asian features. "My name is Lisa Chun," she said in accented but clear galactic standard. "I am also human. I have been studying advanced engineering at this institute for 6 months. My professors have consistently rated my work as exceptional." Another figure stood up in the middle section. A young man with curly red hair pulled off his biomask. "Danny Rodriguez, human, studying galactic law. I am currently ranked second in my class." Then another. "Amy Jackson, human, xenobiology department. I have been Professor Veltar S. research assistant for 3 months." One by one, 7 more students revealed themselves as humans. Each one announced their real name, their field of study, and their academic achievements. The auditorium buzzed with shock and confusion. Jake felt a surge of pride and fear. His fellow humans had chosen to support him, even though it meant giving up their own cover. Dean Quill Ara, the feathered one who had introduced Jake, fluttered her wings nervously. "This is unprecedented. How many humans are enrolled in galactic educational institutions?" "More than you might think," Jake replied. "We are not here as spies or saboteurs. We are here to learn. We want to understand other species, to find common ground, to build better relationships." "By lying about who you are?" Professor Zeeth Kalar demanded, his voice shaking with anger. "By proving our worth," Lisa Chun answered. "How else could we have gained access to advanced education? If we had applied as humans, would we have been accepted?" The question hung in the air. Everyone in the auditorium knew the answer. Most galactic institutions had unofficial policies against admitting humans, considering them too primitive for advanced study. Jakes stepped forward. "Professor, 6 weeks ago you assigned me a research project to prove that humans were capable. Well, here is your proof. 10 humans have been studying at this prestigious institute for months. We have earned top grades, contributed to research projects, and participated in academic discussions. You did not know we were human because we proved ourselves through our work, not our species. We succeeded because you judged us by our abilities, not your prejudices." A crystalline professor in the back raised a glowing appendage. "But the infiltration itself proves human deception and dishonesty." Amy Jackson, a xenobiology student, stepped forward. "Does it? Or does it prove human determination? To overcome prejudice through merit? We could not change your minds about our species by arguing. So we changed your minds by showing you what we could accomplish." Danny Rodriguez nodded. "In galactic law, there is a principle called demonstrated competence. It means that actions matter more than assumptions. We have demonstrated our competence." "Professor." Zeth Kalar looked around the auditorium at his colleagues. Many of them were nodding thoughtfully. Some were checking their own student records, probably wondering if they had humans in their classes too. "This changes nothing," the professor said desperately. "Deception is still deception. These students violated admission protocols." Dean Kolara cleared her throat. "Actually, Professor, I have been reviewing the relevant regulations during this discussion. The students enrolled under the Outer Rim Exchange Program, which allows citizens of any galactic species to apply for educational opportunities. But they used false identities. They used alternative names and appearance modifications," the dean corrected. "The program does not specifically require students to reveal their species of origin, only their academic qualifications." Jake could see the professor's argument crumbling. "Dean Koilara, are you saying that what these humans did was legal?" "I am saying that what they did was unprecedented, but not necessarily against our regulations." The dean's feathers ruffled as she thought. "Perhaps our admission procedures need to be reviewed." A rock person professor spoke up, his voice rumbling like an earthquake. These humans have presented compelling evidence of their capabilities. Their academic performance has been excellent. Perhaps we should judge them by their achievements rather than their origins. More faculty members began to nod in agreement. Jake could see opinion in the room shifting. Professor Zeth Kalar made one last desperate attempt. Even if their performance has been adequate, this infiltration could be part of a larger human plot against galactic institutions. Jake shook his head. Professor, if we wanted to harm these institutions, would we work so hard to excel in them? Would we spend years learning your languages, studying your cultures, earning advanced degrees? We are not here to destroy or conquer, Lisa Chun added. We are here to learn and grow and prove that humans can contribute to galactic civilization. Jake looked directly at Professor Zeth Kalar. 6 weeks ago, you challenged me to prove that humans were capable of advanced thinking. I believe we have done exactly that. The question now is whether you are capable of changing your mind when presented with new evidence. The professor stood silent for a long moment, his skin cycling through several colors as he processed everything that had happened. Finally, he spoke. Student Morrison. Jake Morrison, your presentation was the most comprehensive analysis of tactical psychology I have encountered in my career. Your insights into human behavior were profound and well supported. The professor paused, seeming to struggle with his words. I have spent over 100 years studying different species. I believed I understood humans based on my research and observations, but I never considered that my research might be incomplete or biased. Professor? Jake asked quietly. I think. Zeth Kalar's tentacles moved slowly, showing deep thought. I think I may have been wrong about your species. Not just wrong, but fundamentally wrong. The auditorium erupted in surprised chatter. Students and faculty members began talking excitedly. Among themselves, Dean Koilara called for order. I believe this situation requires careful consideration by the full academic council. In the meantime, I see no reason why our human students cannot continue their education while we review our policies. Jake felt a wave of relief wash over him. Around the auditorium, he could see his fellow humans smiling and embracing each other. Professor Zeth Kalar approached Jake slowly. Student Morrison, would you be willing to guest lecture in Amwai Xenobiology class? I think my students would benefit from hearing about human psychology from an actual human. Jake grinned. I would be honored, Professor, but I think my classmates might have some insights to share as well. As the auditorium began to empty, Jake realized that something important had changed. For the first time in galactic history, humans had proven themselves not through conquest or force, but through intelligence, dedication, and academic excellence. The age of underestimating humanity was finally over.